I don't have a speech. I have some thoughts, things I've come to believe, things I've come to know over time. I'll share those and then avail myself to any questions you might have, or if you want to explore something more broadly or deeply. I do want to share with you, it's a real privilege to be here. I don't do these kinds of things often. Not always clear that they're impactful or a great use of time, but I suspect this is. Not only based on the topic, but based on this organization and everything that you have accomplished and strive for. It's important work, and I'm glad to be a small part of it here today. With me, Chelsea Miner. Chelsea, say hi. I work for Mike Teal. I report to the board of directors, but if you want to know who tells me what to do, she's to my left. And I take it on good advice. I thought I'd share with you a little bit about Raley's and how it's changed and why it's changed in the manner it has. I don't want to stand up here and talk to you about the issues that we're faced without trying to offer some solutions for consideration. I think we get enough of people admiring the problem. I think we all need to be part of the solution or contribute in the manner that we can. And then I'll tell you a little bit about myself in the onset to give you a context as to how my perspective has been shaped over the years that have brought me here. So a little bit about Raley's. The Raley's has become the Raley's Companies. That's because it is now officially a holding company. It has an enterprise located here in West Sacramento, and it has operating companies throughout the Pacific Northwest. It started 90 years ago, if you start with our oldest business operating unit. Raley's itself was formed in 1935 by Tom Raley, our namesake, now held in trust by Mike Teal, Tom Raley's grandson. And we employ 22,000 people throughout, the western half of the United States. And these are if you go back one, thank McKinsey, these are the brands that we operate. So Bash's, AJ's in Food City, Bash's Dene, are mostly Arizona, New Mexico, and the tribal nations of the Navajo, the Tohono O'odham, and the Apache, which is truly a privilege to serve as the exclusive grocer to those incredible people and in its own self, a sovereign nation within our own. Raley's, Bel Air, and Nob Hill, you may all know through kind of the Northern California, Northern Nevada part of our portfolio. And then we have other operating companies that you'd be less familiar with, Capital Millworks, where we make fixtures for the industry. We make furniture for Fortune 100 companies, the tech industry, and all sorts of residential cabinetry and things of that nature. And then Apium is a logistics division that is a full-service gig-modeled delivery company that helps with our e-commerce capabilities. Field True is another family-owned business founded in Northern California by the Barsotti family. It started off with an organic farm and became a farmer's market, and now has evolved into an e-commerce-based subscription company that serves 100,000 customers every week throughout the Pacific Northwest up to and including Alaska, including seaplanes and dog sleds as a last-mile solution. That's a real story. And then Fieldera is a Southern California-based tech development company where our engineers who develop our proprietary software that we operate the business on reside and perform their roles. So that portfolio results in about a $6 billion organization that about 3 years ago was a $3 billion Raley-centric organization, and we've grown through strategic acquisitions and partnerships. And our footprint has changed from what was Northern California and Northern Nevada, centered around Reno, to doing business and serving customers in all of these locales. And that represents about 22,000 team members and about 4 million customers every week in some manner, whether they walk through the front door of one of our 250 stores or we deliver to their front door in whatever manner makes sense to them. So we've evolved, we've changed, we've invested, we've grown. And I just want to tell you a little bit about what we're navigating today and how that might affect our decisions in the future, and certainly how we would imagine being part of the solution in the best manner we know how. There's a couple other slides, Mackenzie, but we'll get to them on cue, but you can park on that one. Thank you. Appreciate it. This is a framework that I talk from a lot, and it's hard to not talk about the Raley's companies without talking about the industry, without talking about California as kind of our homeland, our mothership, if you will, and all that happens in the context of the United States and, of course, in the world. So my thoughts are not just germane to California, but of course I think all of them could be applied in one form or another. And while our country is large and there's an incredible amount to be proud of, no doubt that there are certain states that can shift kind of the direction of the country, and I think California is certainly one of them, given its size, population, influence, and certainly its economy. So, our stewardship goes beyond just the state of California, but can also affect the state of our nation, and so goes our nation, so goes some part of the world, no doubt. So it's an awesome responsibility that we all share. So to kind of maybe not start on a highlight, it's not easy to do business in California. It doesn't have to be easy. I may lose half the room with this statement I'm about to make, but I'm not worried about what the tax base is in California. I'm worried about whether or not it's worth it to live here and do business here. Now you could say, well, that's all interconnected, and I probably wouldn't disagree with that. But taxes are a price we pay to serve all of us. And the question is it worth it? Is it worth it to live here? Is it worth it to move here? Is it worth it to raise multiple generations? Is it worth it to invest here? Is it worth it to grow here? And I'm not sure what the answer to that question is. But it's not an easy yes for sure. It's maybe or no. And the question is, how far towards no are we, and what do we do about it? That's a perspective that I have on taxes. I'll say nothing more about that. I'm proud to pay 52.5%, and I'm privileged that I can. My father once told me, paying taxes, Keith, is a good problem. So that means you have the money, and you should share it, and I'm willing to do that, and I think most people are. Again, is it worth it? Is it being spent wisely? Are other people benefiting from it? Are we all better off because of it? And is our future brighter and more secure for the price paid? And that's just one version of the price. A tragic event back in September resulted in the loss of our chief financial officer, a colleague and dear friend of mine. A private plane accident. Many of you probably know about it. It caused us to seek a new chief financial officer. That search concludes tomorrow when Tiffany Burkhalter, which some of you may have read about, will join Raley's as our chief financial officer. And I'm thrilled to have somebody of Tiffany's caliber join. But that journey required us to hire a search firm. And that search firm, headquartered out of San Francisco, is one of the premier financial search firms that places high-level chief financial officers for the nation, and it serves clients internationally. When I first met with him, I said, is there anything about our brand, our business, or about me that's going to get in the way of us attracting the right person for the job? And the answer was, after a little research, no. Then I said, well, what are the headwinds? And they gave us 3 headwinds. CFOs sometimes tend to like to work in public companies, so Keith, you're competing, and you're a private company. What does that mean? That's the thing. That was second on the list. The other is, there's not a lot of technical chief financial talent out there, and it's going to be hard to find the person. I said, all right, where's that on the list? That's third. What's first on the list? There's a pause, and you know what the answer was. The job resides in California. This was a San Francisco-based search firm who places executive-level financial people throughout the nation and throughout the world, telling me, despite our willingness to pay very competitively, that your number one headwind is you're in California, Keith. And that's not nothing. The other anecdote I would share with you is, now that we have the operating portfolio that you see, when that expansion happened, I've had many people through our support center and our store leadership come to me and say, if there's an opportunity in Arizona, I'd like to go there. No one has come to me in Arizona and said the opposite. So that plane or that train, if it goes anywhere at all, only goes one way. So those are some of the things that are on my mind. That said, I stand before you both optimistic and concerned. I'm not without context. I've done business in every state. I've operated stores in every state, except for Alaska, and every major city and town in the country. Why? Because I was with national retailers who had thousands of stores, and obviously you had one everywhere. So I've been to every city. I've been to every state. I can say that honestly and mean it, and I can back it up. I've lived in 8, including California, which is now home for 8 years, home to my adult daughters, who one preceded us here and one followed us here, and now our 3 grandchildren. So I'm deeply invested. 8 years, almost to the day, and 3 generations reside in Northern California. It needs to work out for the Knopf clan, right? And I'm invested in seeing that it does. I am worried for my daughters and their families. I am particularly worried for the future of my grandchildren here, if they can have any kind of financial independence. So that's the context that I come to you with. I've lived in Texas, I've lived in Nebraska, I've lived in Ohio, I've lived in Virginia, I've lived in Wisconsin, I've lived in Maryland, and I'm sure there's a few others, but California makes 8. I started in Missouri. My point of view on inflation, I think it's plateaued. I think the back half of the second quarter, we're going to see a bit of a recession. Interest rates remain high, energy remains very expensive, and household personal debt is at a record high at nearly $1 trillion again. That's not sustainable. I do think inflation will drift down a little bit towards the back half of this year, early into 2024, settle in before the national election. Most things get a little better right before we all go vote. And I think that's going to be around 4.5%, at least for the run of this calendar year. So getting back to 2 or 3%, I don't see happening, mostly because of energy and the cost of energy. And I think there's a wild card if our supply chain is used in foreign policy, particularly with China. And by the way, I think supply chain is a tool that should be used in managing foreign relations sometimes. That could affect inflation in a way that we have not yet seen, because it will affect our supply chain in certain ways. From an energy perspective, I think there's a public and private collaboration that is required. I think it is imperative that we are independent. I think our security and our economy require it. Plus, I think our standing in the world to be brokers of peace and to broker solutions requires us not to be self-serving or self-dealing. And if energy is involved, you can't show up as an honest broker. We need to solve that, and we can solve it. I think conventional sources of energy must be the bridge. I think alternatives can augment but will never displace conventional. And if you want to go all the way to displacing the current conventionals of coal, gas, and petroleum-based products, you've got to consider, and this is where I no longer run for governor or president of the United States, which I never intend to do, by the way, right? Small, subterranean, close proximity nuclear is the only answer if you want to fully displace conventional fuels. If not, you can augment with wind, you can augment with solar, but you will not displace. There's not enough reliable production that you can count on, and there's not enough scale that you can do it, and you can't build it enough close in. And if you're wondering what do you do with the spent fuel rods, if there are any in the future technology, get these cheap rockets that you can reuse, shoot them into space, send them towards the sun, and bring the rockets home. Space is nothing but stars and radiation anyway. Immediately, the power grid must be improved. The delivery for future needs. We have grand designs, grand plans. Well, if you can't produce it and you can't get it where it needs to go and it can't be done reliably, what's the point? Wind and solar in this country, in this state, by American-owned companies, made by American citizens. It is a matter of security. It is a matter of independence. Education, in and of itself, but much less as it relates to attracting and retaining business and leadership of business and the people who work here, is ultra critical. We are failing the next generation. The next generation that we will leave these challenges to, and we will also look to be the solution for. This is fixable. If it had been my $1 trillion, I would have rebuilt every single school in this country, K through 12. I would modify the curriculums to focus on math, science, reading, and oh, by the way, writing, which people are forgetting how to do quickly. And if you can't write down what you think, it's hard to express it. I'm looking at a piece of paper right here. Whether it's effective or not, you can judge. But I think if we reorganize the principles of education, K through 10, and I do believe in universal kindergarten. Every kid deserves a chance, and we should be able to figure out how to pay for that. I do think art, school, sports, physical education, nutrition education should be part of the curriculum. And I think grades 11 and 12, for those students who do not design or may not pursue a college education, should be given the option for trade skill education. There's nothing that you can't teach up through 10th grade on the fundamentals of learning and education that you need 2 more years to do. If that's the case, you have failed through K through 10 anyway, and the game is over, right, for that student or that individual. So 11th and 12th, for those non-college bound, there should be trade skill options within schools. We need people who know how to do stuff and know how to get things done with their hands and with their minds, and who can pursue a passion that doesn't require 4 more years of education, much less 6 or 8. Crime. There's probably opportunity to improve policing. I think there's plenty of evidence of that. But we need more policing, not less, and we need community engagement. The principles of modern policing that were formed in the last 200 years required a partnership between community, police, and the agencies. And I think we need to reimagine how we support policing, not attack it. Possibly more room for non-lethal means of protecting police officers and protecting innocent citizens. Yes, we can look at sentencing, and yes, we need to enforce the laws we have today. And any harm done to a child should carry the most severe penalties of any and all kind. Water. SoCal infrastructure must be built. The money's been there. It's sitting there. If not, it's been misappropriated. We should look into that. But that money needs to be spent. It should supersede CEQA and all sorts of EIRR requirements. We need to save the water we have. We had enough water running out in the ocean this year to solve our problem for a few. And this summer, we're going to be talking about not having enough water, and it just went right out the drain. That, and I think desal in our larger cities is a requirement, even if it's incredibly expensive. Immigration, dreamers, they're here. They've been here. They are citizens. Give them a path to citizenship. Enforce our laws. Enforce our immigration policies. Revise them where you think we can, but hold the line, literally and figuratively. And for those who do come here, a path to citizenship could and should inquire civic service and possibly service in the military. There's a price to live in this country, and all of us need to pay it. Geopolitical, we need to defend our sovereignty, our borders, our airspace, and supply chain, focus on developing our own Western Hemisphere, strengthen the relationship with Canada, and figure out our relationship with Mexico. We can't be weak in our own hemisphere, and we can't have insecurity on our own borders. And the homeless issue, which is really germane here, we need to utilize state and federal properties that are sitting idle. I am privileged, the company is privileged, we own a jet. I fly out of Mather, I fly out of these very large military institutions. They were built as cities. They have all of the infrastructure. They had commissaries, they had places to sleep, they had Hospitals, they had. And many of them sit idle. There is no solution to homelessness that requires, that is possible by going corner to corner, tree to tree, creek to creek, to find an individual, to try and deliver the services once you do not decide what services they do need. The condition is not universal. There are people escaping domestic violence. There are people on economic hardship. There are drug addictions. There's PTSD. And that brings me to one of the other solutions. Other than bringing people together so that you can provide services in a consolidated way and help triage and then ultimately help them back into well-adjusted members of society, requires that we concentrate our efforts and do it in a respectful way. I think our veterans are part of the answer. I fear that a high percentage of our people who live on the streets are people who are suffering and are formerly served this country in one of the ultimate manners. And if we can help them, they are likely to be the individuals who can help us help the others similarly situated. Because they'll know. And they're already purpose and service driven because they've already been willing to sacrifice for this country. And I'm sure they would go even farther if they felt our support and we enabled them to do so. What I'd like our policymakers to better understand is the interrelated of things. It's not enough to declare what we need to do. You also need to think about how we do it. It has to be sequenced the right way. It has to be paced the right way. It has to be done in a collaborative way. And you can't villainize someone or something to make your point. It's going to take all of us. There's a movie out right now. I haven't seen it. Perhaps you have. My daughter's talked to me about it. It's called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. It's like, wow, I'm not sure I'm going to watch that movie, to be honest with you, but I'm not sure I'm going to get it. But I can tell you it doesn't work. And we've got to back up here. We've got to prioritize. We've got to concentrate our focus, effort, and resources on a critical few things that can make a big difference and build a foundation that we can evolve on top of, not destroy everything that exists today and imagine reinventing it or rebuilding it. It doesn't work that way. I'll show you a few examples. These are California-specific things. This is our yard up in Natomas. On the right, the big picture is an electric yard tractor. What's a yard tractor? That's the thing that moves the trailers around the distribution center as we position them, and we hook them up to an over-the-road tractor. We've experimented with that for 4 or 5 years. It doesn't work. I'm not saying it won't work in the future. It doesn't work now. It's not reliable. It doesn't like the cold, which batteries do not. Right? It doesn't have the torque that is required. We experimented, and there's a point to this. Business will do what is rational. Business will do the right thing if given the right amount of time and if the technology aligns with the mission. The blue tractors were clean air that we tried 10 years ago. Modern technology, alternative fuel, non-diesel. Great idea. This is Raley's investing to try and do the right thing for the right reason, even if it were a bit more expensive. They don't work. They don't pull the Sierras. They don't have the torque. So this idea that we're just magically going to displace conventional for aspirational, in time, I'm sure the technology and the mission will converge. It's probably a hybrid solution, right? But it's not a get rid of this right now and pull this forward. This is just one example. We're not alone. Business tries to find the right way to do the right thing. The other challenge right now is electric trucks. Costs $500,000 a piece if they work at all, and a conventional tractor costs $1.25, 125 grand. Right? If you're not a huge operator, you're out of business. So pace, technology, mission have to align. And for those of you who affect policy in this room, that's an important thing to understand. Next picture, thank you. Theft. Prop 47. It was the beginning of everything we're suffering from right now. And if not the beginning, it was a major milestone in everything we set for right now. Was it a good idea in concept? Probably. Is it a good idea in practice? Absolutely not. What are you looking at here? This is not theft for the sake of stealing to eat. I don't condone that, but I understand it, right? And we have that. This is theft for the sake of stealing for profit. The limit at 950, there's no defending it. No one's coming to the rescue. The police aren't going to show up because there's nothing they're going to do about it. And if they do something about it, that person's going to be right back in the store the next day because they're not going to jail. Right? This causes the availability of items not to be available. Right? It adds price. It adds cost. $60 million incremental theft a year related to Prop 47 a year. That is not available to lower prices for people who can afford more food. Not available to pay people more, which I would gladly spend that $60 million in a minute on wages and benefits. Right? It's money for nothing. It's money for bad actors who are taking care of the ill-conceived thinking of this proposition that has resulted in Raley's alone. We're talking about 100 stores. Think about this across the scale of the state and what business could do with that money. It's billions of dollars that could be put back. You want to pay for the clean air truck? There's the money to do it. You want to increase the minimum wage and pay people more, which quite honestly I'm a fan of? There's the money to do it. This is money for nothing. It's also resulting in the trafficking of young women. Increasingly, we are seeing young women sent into the store, and it's obvious to us they're not there on their own accord, right? Because we're being trafficked into this business. I could talk about utilities. I could talk about PAGA, right? We did our diligence on the companies we bought outside of California. 0 class actions in Arizona against a business doing exactly what we do here in California. We operate stores in Nevada, 30 of them around the Reno area. 0 class actions out of Nevada. I've had 8 in the last 15 years. 60% of those settlements went to lawyers in the state. So if you even believe that companies should be held accountable, which I do, and if we do something wrong, we'll own it, we'll make amends, we'll correct it going forward, and we'll pay the price. That's fair. But anybody who thinks that these class actions are serving the people are mistaken. They are serving the lawyers, and they are serving the state. It's another form of a tax, and it's another form of few people making a lot of money. 60% of the settlements don't go to the people that they claim were harmed or mistreated. That needs to be reformed. I could go on, CEQA. I mean, if you're involved in the expansion of the State House over here, you're all getting a first-hand lesson of what that feels like. I do love trees. I like trees. You can plant more trees, but you do need to be mindful. Last couple things I'll say, then open it up to questions. Give us about 20 minutes as I understand it. Capital flows like water. It will follow the path of least resistance. It will follow the path that generates a return, right? Raley's has spent $300 million, which is in some respects a lot of money, in other respects not, but it's not 0. And it's not here in California. The cost of doing business in California now, given all the dynamics that make it harder and more expensive and slower and more risky, now require California-based business to invest out of California to generate a return to continue to survive in California. I can't grow Raley's fast enough in California. I get sued every time I try and build a new store. Even if I've made all the entitlements, one person can sue you under CEQA. Then when you prevail, because you did the right thing in the right way and it's in the community's best interest and you preserved all the trees you can, it can get appealed. So there's another $1.5 million in another 2 years. Years waiting to get this done. Cost going up. Attorney fees, legal fees. 200 jobs put on hold because of it, not to mention the construction jobs that would go along with it and the tax revenue that would be created by it. So as the expenses and the cost and the burden of operating in California grow, California companies are forced to invest capital out of the state where they can generate a return on that money that allows them to continue to pay the bills back in California. So this idea that, California carries, more is not the case anymore. We are exporting our capital. We are exporting our talent. We are exporting our population, right? And we are only benefiting by virtue of what we invest elsewhere versus here at home. So, those are the things that are on my mind. Those are the things that I wanted to share with you. I believe that, people of good faith, of goodwill and good character can solve this problem. It's going to take courage. It's going to take vision. It's going to require collaboration and long-term thinking. We have to build a foundational program that we can build on that goes longer than just the term of an elected official. Right? I think that's worthy of exploration. I don't know what the answer to that is, but there needs to be things that last more than a finite period of time. So those were the thoughts I wanted to share. I don't know if they're provocative or helpful or even interesting, but I'm glad to answer any questions. I will say this. There was a couple of opening remarks that were quotes. I enjoy those. We've got a few on our building. One of them that resonates with me is by Abraham Lincoln. I'm a bit of a history buff. You wouldn't know that about me. But it goes something like this, and there's versions of it. The best way to predict your future is to create it. Right? That's what I think the people in this room are trying to do, and I'm glad to be a small part of it. So, Tim, I will open it up for questions if there are any.
All right.
And if it's okay, Chelsea, who is far more familiar with a lot of propositions and stuff, I might ask to build on the answer or maybe answer the question itself.
So Laura here. Laura, wave to everybody.
Hello,
Laura
Laura
will be going around, so raise your hand with questions, and she'll come and find you.
I'll let you hold it so I don't dominate. I know how this works. I have a question and a thought that you might want to comment on. Okay, so the question is, you operate in a number of different states. Can you estimate what percentage of your increased costs are government imposed? And then the thought is, we have a lot of leftists, you might say, in government, and I think they don't really like the idea of the free market. And I'm a scientist, so I analyze things. Like, you've done some great analysis. I have to applaud you for that.
Thank you.
But one thing that's pretty clear to me is they're using CO2, plant food, as a means to control the engines of our economy, to create an excuse for centralized planning, because they love central control.
Sure.
And they are anti-free market. So that's the thing, if you can comment on that.
Be here a while on that one. Your first question, how much could I attribute incremental cost in our portfolio, California versus other? I'm going to take a bit of an educated swag, but it's not something it is something I've spent time on trying to null out. I'd say it's somewhere between $75 and $100 million on the same revenue basis. So if you take some anecdotal and just extrapolate from there, we drive 30 million miles a year, people bringing stuff to us getting stuff to stores, things like that. That cost just in the last 2 years, 34% more. Cost about $1.25 now more to drive a mile in California than it does in Arizona. That's anecdotal to kind of your question. There's a number of examples like that I would tell you. Our insurance, 5 years ago, for no reason, we've never lost a store, we've never had one, fall to, fire or flood. It used to be 2.5 million. In California, it's 8 million. So, that's a lot of policies, and there's a lot of other factors in that, right? But our business model risk hasn't really changed. Business model hasn't evolved that much. So there's examples like that have changed. For clarity, and this is a tangent answer to your question, we own and operate 100 stores in Northern California. That's the California footprint. Half of those are affiliated with a union of some kind, half are not. We pay the same, if not better, in non-union stores than we pay in union stores. The only difference experienced between a team member working in a union store and a non-union store is the $1,080 a year that they pay in dues. That's the only difference. So this idea that government has to regulate the conscience of business is misinformed. We could not have survived 87 years by mistreating the people that we count on to represent our business to the community. That is not the kind of oversight business needs. Business is reasonable. Business is practical. Business will find the right way to do the right thing if given the time to do it. And I think that's another example of that. Oh, your question about, there's just this conspiracy theory 21 of trying to concentrate people into urban areas, and I don't know. I'm a bit of a movie buff. I watch some movies and I think, well, that's what that looks like if that's what you do. I think there's a lot of dynamics in play in terms of how to manage a population of people over large land masses. That creates both opportunities and challenges. This said, I think that what has made this country great and what makes it unique in the world, and we need to fight to preserve it, and California is an example of that, is that we have abundant resources, we have abundant natural beauty, we have talented, purpose-driven people, and we just need to make sure that the formula of how we bring all that together, how we're stewards of that with each other and for each other, works. And I think that's right now been brought into question. And I hope that cooler heads prevail, and I hope that more purpose, vision-driven people who understand not just what to do, but also how to do it and how things can actually happen. The process matters, right? Can be brought together to see us through this into a brighter future. As this country goes, so goes the world, in my opinion. Yes.
Hi, thanks for coming to speak.
Thanks,
You
Ken.
mentioned PAGA once. I hope you could just elaborate on that a little bit more. And then also, if Gavin Newsom was here, what are the top 3 levers that if you could wave a wand and make go away, whether it's CEQA, Prop 47, what are the biggest levers for change?
Yeah. PAGA basically, as Chelsea can probably articulate better than I, really are some governing rules, policies, and regulations around, lawsuits and class action activity. And Chelsea, why don't you build on that with your expertise?
Yeah, so it's really around wage and hours and how our employees are given in a paycheck. So a PAGA lawsuit can be as simple as the address of the business is wrong on your paycheck, or you could actually have been wronged and maybe we miscalculated your pay in some form. The real challenge with PAGA is they become class actions. So everyone involved in the class action is not actually likely to be wronged, but because of the sheer scale, most of them are just settled through court. And so these settlements cost hundreds of millions of dollars. The retail industry alone has cost about $100 million kind of over an 18-month period. So, and as Keith had noted, the real challenge is, right, what we would want to do is make the employee whole, right? We would want to make sure that they're paid their actual wage, but the plaintiff's attorneys take a huge proportion of the earnings of those settlements, and so it actually doesn't get back to the actual employee who was wronged.
What was the second part of your question, Ken? Just shout it out to me again.
Oh, just what are the top 3 levers?
Top 3, yes. Yeah. it's hard to put them top three. I think what our elected officials and policymakers fail to understand is this "is it worth it" question, right? And the stacking effect, the layering effect of disparate policies that don't align. And we could stay all day here and talk about, well, that was implemented, but that doesn't reconcile to that. There's no way to implement that. That makes any common sense. You can't do what you want us to do, and you certainly can't do it by tomorrow at noon, by the way. So, you know, I'd bucket it. I'd say that homelessness, crime, you know, if people aren't safe, nothing works. I mean all people. And if the future of our children isn't bright and secure, and they're not on a track to learn and to grow in a safe school environment that, you know, provides them the fundamentals and possibly life skills to pursue something other than college, then you really got to ask yourself, you know, are people going to stay here? At what cost? Are you going to stay here at the cost of your children's future? So, you know, I put those two things on the bookends around. We got to fix education, right? Can't be the 5th largest economy in the world and the largest in the United States and have, like, you know, the bottom quartile performance in education. I mean, explain that to anybody and see if it makes sense when you say it out loud. It doesn't. How could that be? It's because we let it be. And if you're not safe, you know, and you're not proud of where you live, then is it worth it? I'd say no. Then in between that, you've got all the things that just make it harder, and is it a good use of time, energy, and money? You know, the PAGA is an example of no. Doing the right thing is, right? But it's about doing the right thing, not punishing necessarily. You know, well-intended, but, you know, if somebody made a mistake, clean it up, make people whole, move on, right? There was no harm intended there necessarily. And if there was, that's a different kind of thing, and that should be addressed. CEQA, if we want to invest, right, there's a $1 billion expansion over here at the State House that's held up, right? Probably by a special interest group or one person. Maybe they're right, maybe they're not, but is that in the best interest of the citizens of this state and the state itself? I would say probably not. So somebody's got to reconcile that, right? So those are the kinds of things that I would ask for broader, deeper, more long-term vision and thinking. Transportation, you know, we could be here all day, and I am going to be out of time in 4 minutes.
One more
Right.
quick question.
One more quick. Well, on transportation, right? If you drive up and down Highway 50, you drive up and down 80, it's been under construction for the 8 years I've lived here. We add a lane, then next year we come back and we start over and we add a lane, next year we come over, right? If you want rail, figure out how to use the existing rail system you have, make it comfortable, make it safe, make it clean, make sure there's connectivity on it, make sure there's, you know, and a 2-hour ride from Sacramento to San Francisco is fine by me to go see my granddaughter. I don't need to get there in 20 minutes. It's going to take me 2.5 hours to drive there anyway if I'm lucky, right? I don't need to get from San Francisco to LA in 45 minutes. It's going to take me 8 hours to drive on a good day now. If it took me 5 hours comfortably, that's a win, right? So my point about the highways is, instead of fighting every farmer, every city, every town, forcing eminent domain on people, put the damn tracks right down the middle of the highway. I've been in other states. They've done it. Well, the rail cars won't clear the bridges. We'll reinvent the rail car. That's a hell of a lot easier than putting tracks through a mountain. So there's got to be common sense to the approaches, and everything can't be episodic and revolutionary. Evolutionary iteration is fine, and it's the only thing that we can afford, and it's the only thing that people can really get around.
Well, you know,
Go easy. I got 2 minutes here, and I'm
I'm steeped in free markets, right? I believe in free markets.
I do too.
I'm a capitalist. I'm not afraid to admit that. But, you know, free markets can fail. And
can.
one of the issues is a concentration of power, oligopolies, right? And I think the grocery industry is close to that, right? And you mentioned inflation.
It might get closer with
being
what's
an
going on in
issue.
the acquisition. Yeah.
And part of the accusation is that, you know, inflation is very high in the food sector, and groceries and food producers are raising prices just because they can, right? You know, so is there a role for government to say, no, you shouldn't be doing that, right? I mean, it's a steamwalling effect that keeps on going. So how do we stop
Well-
that, you know, when there's such a concentration and you can do that, and there's not competition that normally would bring down the prices.
Yeah, your understanding of price on food is wrong. The cost is 200 basis points higher than we are able to pass on to retail. We sell $1. We lose $1 now on a carton of eggs, right? That's a policy issue related to the production of eggs, which relates to chicken policy. We can be here all day if you want to talk about that, right? So it's not we've raised prices because we can. Energy, and this is why I'm not confident inflation is going to come down. This is why I'm not optimistic that we're out of the woods here economically by any means, is the misunderstanding that energy and the cost of energy is an input into every single thing. The Fed policymakers are confused, or at minimum, misunderstanding the fact. They've got their foot on the gas and their foot on the brake, and they're wondering why nothing's happening. Well, you can't drive up the cost that is in energy and then expect prices to come down. It doesn't work that way. Energy is in everything we do. You can't make a plastic bottle without energy. You can't get something from point A to point B without energy. You can't turn on the lights without energy, right? You can't produce an egg without energy. So your misunderstanding of the food industry is incorrect. The monopoly-duopoly idea is correct. And I would argue that state and federal policies are actually driving us more towards those things. If you concentrate power production into the hands of a few, you eliminate the free market, right? If you concentrate anything into the hands of a few, if only a few people can afford an electric tractor trailer, how many tractor trailer delivery companies are there going to exist in the state, much in the nation? It's not going to be as many as there are today. So the free market collapses because you concentrate it around only those people, those companies that can afford that kind of technology. And you collapse the free market economy because the guy and his family, or the woman and her family who have built a 10-truck small family business, can't afford to spend $4 million on tractor trailers. They're out. They no longer participate. They're no longer take some of the demand. And all of a sudden the demand gets concentrated on the few that can. And that does lead to a duopoly or maybe a monopoly. That's already happened in the pharmacy industry, right? Truck example, I'll land on this one. If electric trucks were the answer, or electric cars were the answer to everything, then two questions should be asked, and are obvious. Why aren't all mail postal delivery electric today? The federal government thinks that's the answer? Why is there a gas-burning mail truck in the front of my house every morning? Why? Because it doesn't work yet. And why aren't Tesla cars that are electric being hauled by electric tractor trailers? Because they don't work. The grid's not there. The power delivery, if the track does work, isn't there. So these are the dynamics. So I know we're out of time. I hope it was interesting, if not helpful.